My grandma turned 79, but no one came to her party. She sat alone with her cake, while my parents skied in Aspen. The next day, while I was helping her clean the house, two strangers knocked on her door and handed me a folder signed by Grandma herself. What happened next hit like a storm. No one saw it coming. The air in Boulder, Colorado, usually felt like breathing in the soul of the world, crisp, pine-scented, and filled with the promise of the rugged Rocky Mountains. But for me, Devin Hayes, a 23-year-old law student, that air felt like a weight. I was a ghost in my own skin, a silent shadow passing through the halls of a family that only valued what could be measured in a bank account or a social media like. I grew up in Castle Rock, a town of red brick charm and the smell of freshly baked bread. To an outsider, our house was a masterpiece. To me, it was a museum of cold perfections. My father, Richard, was a real estate shark who saw people as square footage. My mother, Cynthia, was a woman of porcelain smiles and manicured nails, obsessed with the aesthetic of our lives. Then there was Kyle, the golden boy, the MBA-toting tech entrepreneur in Austin whose success was the sun my parents orbited. And Avery, my sister, who lived her life through the lens of a smartphone, cropping me out of every family photo as if I were a smudge on a lens. The only person who truly saw me, the only person who made me feel like I existed, was my grandmother, Lorraine. She lived in an old, weathered house in Fort Collins, an hour and a half away. Her home smelled of herbal tea and old wood. She was 80 years old, silver-haired, with eyes that held the warmth of 1,000 sunsets. After my grandfather, Henry, a man of justice and the law, passed away 4 years ago, she became the keeper of our history. Devin, she would tell me, her voice a steady anchor, as long as you live true to your heart, you are never lost. But lately, the anchor was slipping. Grandma was fading. The sharp, vibrant woman was being replaced by a ghost who called me by my grandfather's name and forgot why she had walked into a room. My parents dismissed it. She's old, Devin. Forgetfulness is part of the package, my father would say, his eyes never leaving his spreadsheets. Everything came to a head on a Friday afternoon. I received a text that made my blood run cold. Devin, are you free this weekend? I made a birthday cake and want you to try it. It was her 79th birthday. I checked my calendar. My heart hammered against my ribs. I had no exams. I had no excuses. I realized with a surge of guilt that I hadn't visited her in 3 weeks because I was busy. But something in that text felt different. It felt like a plea. I'll be there, Grandma. Wait for me, I typed back. The drive to Fort Collins was a blur of golden fields and rising anxiety. I had made a wooden photo frame for her, holding a picture of her smiling in her garden from the previous summer, a rare moment of pure joy. I wanted to remind her that she was still here, that she still mattered. As I pulled up to her house, the silence hit me first. Usually, the radio would be playing low, or I'd see her silhouette through the window. But the house looked hollow. The chimney was cold. I pushed the door open, the wood groaning under my hand. Grandma? I'm here. I called out, forcing a cheerful tone. No answer. I walked into the kitchen, and my heart shattered. There she was, sat alone at the small dining table, wearing the blue sweater I'd given her last year. In front of her was a beautiful, lopsided strawberry cake with 79 written in shaky white frosting. But she wasn't eating. She was staring at the wall with an expression so vacant, so lost, that I froze in the doorway. Grandma? I whispered. She looked up, her eyes struggling to find me. Devin, she whispered back, her voice like dry leaves. You're here. I made this cake, but... She looked down at the frosting, her lip trembling. Why did I make it? Is it someone's birthday? I had to swallow the scream building in my throat. She had forgotten her own birthday. It's yours, Grandma, I said, kneeling beside her and taking her thin, trembling hand. I came to have a slice with you. She gave me a weak, heartbreaking smile. So I must have made it for myself. But where are the others? Where is Richard? Where is Cynthia? Where is the little one, Avery? The question was a jagged blade. I looked around the kitchen. The table was set for two. Just two. No cards. No flowers. No phone calls. They must be busy, Grandma. I lied, the taste of the words like ash. But I'm here. Let's eat. We ate in a silence broken only by the ticking of the wall clock. Every bite of that sweet cake felt like poison. After we finished, she looked at me with a sudden, haunting clarity. Devin, have you seen your grandfather? He said he'd be home for the party. He's late. Grandpa had been dead for 4 years. I couldn't take it. I stepped out onto the porch, my hands shaking as I dialed my father's number. It rang 4 times before he picked up. Devin, what is it? I'm in the middle of something, he snapped. It's Grandma's birthday, I said, my voice vibrating with rage. Why is she alone? Why isn't anyone here? There was a pause. Then, the sound of wind and laughter in the background. Oh, we're in Aspen, Devin. Kyle's been under a lot of stress with the startup, so we decided a family ski weekend was necessary. Your mother sent her a check last week. She's fine. A family weekend? I hissed. She's your mother, Dad. She's sitting here asking for Grandpa. She's losing her mind, and you're skiing? Calm down, he said, his voice turning ice cold. She has you there, don't she? Don't be dramatic. We'll see her at Christmas. Goodbye, Devin. I stared at the phone. My perfect family was 3 hours away, drinking champagne on a mountain, while the woman who raised them was disappearing into the fog of dementia in a cold house. I sat back down next to her, watching her fidget with the tablecloth. I didn't know it then, but the ski trip wasn't just a vacation. It was a distraction. While I sat there holding her hand, a plan was already in motion. A plan that would sell my grandmother's soul for a tech startup's debt. The following few days were a blur of quiet domesticity and simmering resentment. I couldn't leave her. I told my professors I was dealing with a family emergency, which wasn't. A lie. The emergency was that my family had no heart. I spent the mornings tending to the garden, pulling weeds while Grandma sat in her old wooden chair, her eyes following me with a mixture of pride and confusion. We talked about Grandpa Henry. We talked about the law. Law isn't just about winning, Devin, she'd repeat, her voice momentarily strong. It's about being the voice for the person who has been silenced. I didn't realize how prophetic those words would be until Tuesday morning. I was in the living room, dusting the old mahogany bookshelf, when a sharp, authoritative knock echoed through the house. It wasn't the gentle tap of a neighbor. It was the knock of someone who owned the place. I opened the door to find a middle-aged couple. The man was in a sharp gray suit, clutching a leather briefcase like a shield. The woman beside him looked uncomfortable, her eyes darting around the weathered porch. Can I help you? I asked, my pulse quickening. Hello, the man said, his voice rehearsed. I'm Bob Miller, and this is my wife, Susan. We're here for the final walkthrough before we take possession next week. The world tilted on its axis. Possession? You're at the wrong house. This is the Hayes residence. It's not for sale. Bob frowned, pulling a stack of papers from his briefcase. I think there's a misunderstanding, son. We signed the closing documents 3 days ago. We worked directly with Mr. Richard Hayes. Here is the deed of transfer. He handed me a document. I snatched it, my eyes scanning the lines until they landed at the bottom. My breath hitched. There was my grandmother's signature, Lorraine Hayes. It was shaky, the trailing off as if she had hesitated, or perhaps as if someone had guided her hand. This isn't possible, I whispered, the paper trembling in my grip. She wouldn't sell this house. It's all she has. Look, we've already paid the deposit to Richard's firm, Bob said, his tone hardening. He assured us she was moving into a luxury care facility and was eager to sell. We have a move-in date of next Monday. Get off this porch, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Excuse me? I said get off the porch. This contract is a lie. My grandmother is inside, and she doesn't know who you are. I slammed the door and leaned against it, my chest heaving. I went straight to the bedroom. Grandma was napping, her chest rising and falling softly. I sat on the edge of the bed and gently shook her shoulder. Grandma, Please look at me. She opened her eyes, blinking away the fog. Devin? Is it time for tea? Grandma, did Dad come over while I was at school last week? Did he bring papers for you to sign? She frowned, her fingers plucking at the quilt. Richard He came. He was in such a hurry. He said he needed my help to protect the family. He said it was just bank papers for Kyle. He told me if I didn't sign, Kyle would go to jail. A hot, searing wave of fury washed over me. My father hadn't just neglected her, he had weaponized her love for her grandson against her. He had lied to a woman who couldn't remember what she had for breakfast, telling her she was saving Kyle, all to trick her into signing away her home. I didn't even think. I grabbed my phone and walked out to the backyard so she wouldn't hear me scream. I dialed my father. He picked up on the first ring. Devin, I assume the Millers arrived? I forgot to tell you to clear out your things. You monster, I spat. You tricked her. You told her she was saving Kyle from jail? You sold her house out from under her while you were skiing in Aspen? Watch your mouth. Richard roared. Do you have any idea the debt Kyle is in? His investors were going to sue him into the ground. The family name would be dragged through the mud. This house is worth $500,000, Devin. It's an asset. And Lorraine is 80. She belongs in a home where professionals can deal with her episodes. She belongs here. In her memories. With the life she built with Grandpa. The life she built is over, my father said, his voice dropping to a chilling, businesslike calm. The papers are signed. The money is already in Kyle's business account. It's done. If you want to be a hero, find her a nice room in a facility by Monday, because the locks are being changed. I am a law student, Dad, I said, my voice deathly quiet. And you just committed elder abuse and fraud. I'm not moving her. I'm moving her into my apartment in Boulder for safety, and then I am coming for you. You wouldn't dare sue your own father. You'd destroy your career before it starts. My career starts with protecting the people who can't protect themselves. See you in court, Richard. I hung up and threw the phone against the grass. I had no money. I had no law degree. I was a first-year student with a mountain of debt and a grandmother who sometimes forgot my name. But I had the truth. I went back inside and saw Grandma standing by the window, looking at her garden. Devin, she said, her voice small. Are we leaving? I walked over and put my arm around her frail shoulders. Just for a little while, Grandma. We're going to stay at my place. But I promise you, I am going to bring you home. The tiny studio apartment in Boulder was never meant for two. Books were stacked in corners, and the air was thick with the scent of legal pads and old coffee. I gave Grandma the only bed, sleeping on a thin mattress on the floor beside her. Every night, I watched her sleep, her breathing shallow, her hands clutching the wedding photo of her and Grandpa Henry as if it were a life raft. I was no longer just a student, I was a man possessed. I spent my days in the university law library, fueled by spite and caffeine. I reached out to my civil law professor, Margaret Stein, a legendary litigator known for her ironclad ethics. Devin, she said, leaning across her desk after reviewing my notes. You're proposing to sue your father for rescission of contract based on lack of capacity and undue influence. It's a nightmare to prove with family involved. They'll claim she was lucid that day. They'll claim you're the one being unstable. I have her doctor, professor, and I have a neighbor who saw my father pressuring her, I countered, my voice raspy from lack of. It's not enough to have facts. You need to be a surgeon in that courtroom. Your father has hired Marcus Thorne. My heart dropped. Thorne was a fixer, a lawyer who specialized in making inconvenient people disappear behind legal jargon and non-disclosure agreements. I don't care, I said. He can have the devil on his side. I have her. The weeks leading up to the trial were a psychological war. My mother called me, weeping into the phone. Devin, please. You're tearing this family apart. Kyle is finally getting back on his feet. Do you want your brother to lose everything? Do you want us to be the talk of the town? You sold Grandma's memories to pay for Kyle's mistakes, Mom. You already tore the family apart. I'm just picking up the pieces. Avery, my sister, posted a photo of the three of them, Dad, Mom, and Kyle, at a gala. The caption read, "Family is everything. Grateful for those who stand by us through the storms." I wasn't in the photo. I was the storm they were trying to ignore. The day of the hearing arrived. The Fort Collins courthouse was a cold, stone building that felt like a fortress. I wore my only suit, the sleeves a bit too short, feeling like a child playing dress-up. Across the aisle sat my father, looking regal in a bespoke navy suit, and my mother, her face a mask of disappointment. Kyle was absent, likely hiding in Austin, and Avery was nowhere to be found. Marcus Thorne stood up first. His voice was like velvet over gravel. "Your Honor, this is a tragic case of a disgruntled son trying to exert control over a family's private financial decisions. Mrs. Lorraine Hayes signed this deed voluntarily. She was moving into a premier care facility. This lawsuit is nothing more than a youthful rebellion masked as concern." When it was my turn, my legs felt like lead. I looked at Grandma, sitting in the front row. She looked so small in that large room. She looked at me and whispered, "Henry?" I took a breath. "Your Honor, my name is Devin Hayes. I am not here to rebel. I am here to speak for someone who can no longer remember the words to defend herself." I called Dr. Harris to the stand. He presented the cognitive tests from 6 months ago, tests my father had ignored. Then I called Susan Miller, the woman who was supposed to buy the house. "Mrs. Miller," I asked, "the day the contract was signed, did Lorraine Hayes seem to understand who you were?" Susan looked at my father, then at me. She sighed. "No. She kept asking if we were there to fix the plumbing. And when Mr. Richard Hayes told her to sign, he held her hand. He moved the pen with her. I felt uneasy, but he told us it was just her nerves." The courtroom went silent. I turned to my father. He didn't look at me. He was staring at the judge, his jaw clenched so tight I thought it might snap. Finally, I did the hardest thing I've ever done. I called Grandma to the stand. "Grandma," I said softly, standing near her so she wouldn't be afraid, "do you remember the day you signed the papers for the house?" She looked around the room, her eyes wide. "The house? Henry and we built that house. We painted the nursery yellow for Richard. But I would never sell it. But your signature is on this paper, Grandma." She started to cry, a quiet, devastating sound. "Richard said Kyle was in trouble. He said I had to help. I didn't know. I didn't know it meant I couldn't go back to my garden." Thorne tried to cross-examine her, trying to trip her up on dates and names to prove she was unreliable, but it backfired. Every time she forgot a detail, it only proved my point further. She lacked the capacity to sign a legal document. The judge, a woman who looked like she had seen 1,000 tragedies, didn't leave the bench to deliberate. She looked directly at my father. "Mr. Hayes," she said, her voice dripping with disdain, "the law is not a tool to be used for the cannibalization of your own parents' dignity." She struck the gavel. "The contract is hereby declared null and void. The deed is rescinded. Temporary guardianship of Lorraine Hayes is granted to the plaintiff, Devin Hayes." I didn't cheer. I didn't smile. I just walked over to Grandma, took her hand, and led her out of the room. My father intercepted us in the hallway. "You've won the battle, Devin," he whispered, his face purple with rage. "But you've lost your family. Don't ever come home. Don't ever ask me for a cent. You're dead to us." I looked him in the eye, the man I had spent 23 years trying to impress. "I was never alive to you, Dad. I was just a shadow. But Grandma, she sees me. And that's enough." The victory didn't come with a celebration. There were no cameras, no champagne, and no family dinner. There was only the long, quiet drive back to the house in Fort Collins. As my old car rumbled up the gravel driveway, the sun was beginning to dip behind the snow-capped peaks of the Rockies, casting a bruised purple light over the world. Grandma sat in the passenger seat, clutching her purse. When I killed the engine, she didn't move. She just stared at the chipped wooden window frames and the overgrown lavender bushes. "We're home, Grandma," I said. She turned to me, and for a fleeting, beautiful second, the fog in her eyes cleared. She reached out and patted my cheek with a hand that felt like parchment. "You kept your promise, Henry," she whispered. I didn't correct her this time. If she needed me to be the man who loved her for 50 years, I would be him. The months that followed were the hardest and most beautiful of my life. I withdrew from law school for the semester. My father kept his word. He cut me off completely. He emptied my college fund and blocked my number. Kyle sent me a single, venomous email accusing me of stabbing the family in the back and wishing me luck living in poverty with a senile old woman. But I wasn't in poverty. I found a job clerking for a local firm in Fort Collins during the day, and at night, I studied my law books by the light of Grandma's fireplace. I learned how to be more than a student. I learned how to cook her favorite stew. I learned how to garden, guided by her shaky instructions. Deep breaths, Devin, she'd say on the days she remembered my name. Plants don't grow by force. They grow by patience. One afternoon, I was out in the yard pruning the wild roses when a car pulled up. It was Avery. She didn't get out at first. She just sat in her luxury SUV, looking at the house. Finally, she stepped out, her designer sunglasses perched on her head. She looked out of place against the rugged, honest backdrop of the mountains. "Dad is still furious," she said, standing at the edge of the porch. "He's telling everyone you're a thief." "And what are you telling people, Avery?" I asked, not stopping my work. She looked at her shoes. "I'm not telling them anything. But I deleted the photos from the ski trip. It felt wrong after I heard what happened in court. It was wrong before you heard, Avery. It was wrong the moment you all left her here alone on her birthday." She looked at the house, then at me. Is she okay?" "She's happy," I said. "She doesn't always know where she is, but she knows she's loved. That's more than I can say for the rest of you." Avery didn't stay long. She left a small box of chocolates on the porch and drove away. It was a tiny gesture, perhaps the first real thing she'd done in years, but it wasn't enough to bridge the canyon between us. As autumn turned to winter, Grandma's episodes became more frequent. There were nights I stayed up until dawn, holding her hand while she cried for a mother she hadn't seen in 70 years. There were days she didn't know who I was at all. But then, there were the clear moments. On a cold Tuesday evening, we were sitting in the living room. The fire was crackling, and the smell of pine needles filled the air. Grandma was looking at the wooden photo frame I had made her, the one with the picture of her in the garden. "Devin," she said. Her voice was sharp, clear, and unmistakable. I looked up from my textbook. "Yes, Grandma? You're going to be a wonderful lawyer," she said, her brown eyes shining with a lucidity that took my breath away. "Not because you're smart, but because you're brave. You fought for an old woman when there was nothing in it for you but a hard life. Your grandfather is so proud of you. I am so proud of you. I did it because you're my home, Grandma." She smiled, a slow, tired smile. "I'm not your home, sweetheart. This house isn't your home. Your home is the truth you carry inside you. Don't ever let them take that away." She fell asleep shortly after that, the peaceful sleep of someone who had won her final battle. I eventually went back to law school. I graduated at the top of my class, but I didn't go to work for a big firm in Denver or Austin. I stayed in Fort Collins. I opened a small practice dedicated to elder law and advocacy for the vulnerable. I still live in the house with the weathered gray roof and the lavender garden. My parents and I haven't spoken in years. Kyle's company eventually folded, and he moved on to the next scheme, never once checking on the woman whose house he tried to steal. But every year, on a Friday in midwinter, I bake a strawberry cake. I set the table for two. I sit in the armchair by the fire and I tell the stories of a dedicated lawyer named Henry, a brave woman named Lorraine, and a grandson who refused to let them be invisible. I am Devin Hayes. I am no longer a shadow. I am a guardian. And I have learned that the only people who truly belong in your life are the ones who wouldn't dream of leaving you behind when the snow starts to fall.